All right, welcome everybody, and hopefully this will be well, we'll see how it goes, but this will be the last stream with our guy here. We'll get as much as we can done this week, so we can move on to some other fun stuff next time we meet. So let's just jump into it. Okay, let's move this guy up around there. Just kind of block that off a little bit. There we go. And so, just kind of recap what we've got going on in here. Let's grab the red. We got pretty far with sort of some of the lighting and the rendering of the volumes in here. There's still quite a bit to do in terms of pulling out some of these forms. Some of them are fairly rudimentary in here, like there's some work to do on that guy. I might do a little bit of work on this guy's head in here, just to kind of make the teeth a little bit more prominent, as some of his tentacles are way more prominent than his face. So things we can work with there, but in general, a really good setup, I think, going into maybe some color by the end. Okay, so let's have at it. Hey, welcome. I am good. How are you doing? How's life treating you? We did start painting pretty flat on this guy, so we're gonna commit to this by now. Again, if you're making some concept art for a client, it's not always great to just collapse everything on top, but we're far enough along, we'll assume that the client's good with it. That's just food for thought there. One of the things with this piece that I did want to do after looking at it for a little bit is the struts that hold the glass together are looking pretty good. Satisfied with them, except there's not, I kind of want to add this technological element to it. So it feels like there's more going on than just a frame and glass in there. So I'm just going to kind of open up each one of those intersections a little bit. Just going to kind of add this in here, where I'm going to place this little maybe glowing node or light within that. Not a huge change, but enough to indicate there's like maybe something more interesting going on underneath the chassis of that. So I'll just put like a little dot of light in there. It could be like a little lens. It could even just be something simple like bolts, right? I'm not super worried about people knowing exactly what it is. I just want to kind of add another element in there, another kind of technological element of some sort. So let's just kind of pop that in there. We had those guys, and maybe we'll kind of add something over in here. So just a little element. We can always come back in there later and put some glow in, but I am going to switch to a airbrush. Tired of times, aren't we all? So I think I'm gonna focus on, for a little bit of this, I'm fairly happy with the frame, so I'm gonna focus on some of the body parts and the tubing. Just to those need a little bit more work, and then I can come in and maybe quickly resolve some of the rough qualities of the frame. So I'm gonna get close to this guy, kind of focus on his face a little bit here. And normally at this stage I wouldn't do a whole bunch of reworking of, say, the stuff that I laid down, but sometimes what'll happen is your client will come in and they'll be like, well, this or that's not working so well in hindsight, so let's maybe revisit it. I'm basically feeling that way about the mouth, so I'm going to come in here and make the teeth look a little bit more aggressive and larger, or kind of take up more of the real estate on the face. because I feel like they're kind of not looking as impressive as the tentacles. So let's just kind of rough in some of that stuff. Hey, I assume Brandon. I hope things are well. I heard recently a lot of our directors sort of don't like to see things like creatures and fantasy things in portfolios. Is there any credence to that? I'm guessing maybe you meant art directors? Yeah, okay, see, you corrected it there. Things like creatures and fantasy things in portfolios. I don't know where you heard that. That seems really unusual. Is there any credence to that? Would you prefer to see humans and things more grounded? Not at all. I'd be very curious to know where you heard that from. Now, that would be the case if an art director is working on something highly realistic and that there's no need for fantasy or creature work, right? But what about the people that are making creature work? If they only saw in your portfolio that you did humans or kind of like realistically grounded things, they might want to see something of where you do creature work. So yeah, I'm not I don't lend any credence to that. I feel like that's just a very specific situation for some portfolio review for a very specific job, right? And I mean, that just points to the fact that you can tailor make your portfolio towards different jobs that you want to get, right? Like, let's think about if you're trying to get a job at Naughty Dog, or I mean, Naughty Dog's even a good example of, you know, if you had some creature design, which you can kind of say zombies are, to work on a game like The Last of Us, whereas it's not going to be as important maybe to a game like Uncharted, because there's less of that. I mean, there were the kind of these Yeti creatures in the one version of the game, but you know, it'd be less likely that you'd want to show a ton of creature stuff for a job like that, right? So yeah, and I guess with something like that question, it is good to kind of mention is like, different art directors, different people will sometimes say things in a way that it sounds like this is a rule that everyone should follow, instead of kind of being more specific about it's something that they're specifically looking for, right? So it just needs to be, I think it needs to be mentioned there that it's just dependent, right? I've said this to a lot of my students when they ask about portfolio reviews with project work or work only about characters. If you know you're wanting to do character work, it's like that is absolutely something that is true for bigger studios, right? But smaller studios or indie studios, mobile game studios, where you switch your product IP up or your theme up quite a bit, you're going to need to see that somebody maybe has some agility to move through different themes and different categories like environment, character, that kind of thing. Big guys like big studios with big deep pockets can afford specialist artists, in which case you would want to have a specialized portfolio. So hopefully that makes sense. What do I think about the use of Easter eggs in gaming? Do you think they've enhanced the game? Yeah, I mean, that means just there's some extra efforts gone into the game, I would think. So, yeah, the only time I think maybe that's not a good idea is if they do something politically incorrect, or the Easter egg actually hampers progression or something like that. It's happened. So, hopefully that's not the case for the developer. But I like them. It's fun to discover things, and I think that helps the community feel like it's a live product, right? So I don't mind them. Hey, Sean. Let's Give him some sort of big juicy lips. Maybe we'll give him some bigger teeth down below as well. I think his mouth full of like crazy teeth would actually be a lot more fun than just a small set. But I kind of want like a big lip hanging down on this guy. So we'll see maybe a bit of the gums down here. And then the kind of wells in between the gums, and then maybe some of the flesh as it kind of pulls out. Some of those strange irises popping through. Maybe we'll make them a little bit more milky so it doesn't look like they're just super clear. So I am planning there to be a shadow over top of his head from the actual dome that he came from. So I want to make sure that some of that stuff up the top of him actually feels like it's in the darkness. Get some of these spines popping out. So some of these eyes just may fall into shadow. Right, the rim light from the water on either side is definitely something we want to keep, but those upper eyes need to feel like they're in shadow compared to the eyes that are in full view. Mass crawling around the side of him there. Depending on how much time you have, like you could spend forever, right, on some of these things. But the nice thing about concept art as well is that you don't always have to. You can a lot of the times get away with more of impressionistic representations of forms and whatnot. So, but sometimes it's really nice to get those values and volumes locked in and see where we were at. Me painting on this other layer above the original artwork that we did allows me to see that, right? So I can, and also I'm not committing right away, right? I can commit that later when I'm happy with it, but sometimes you'll want to switch gears. Let's take a look at him from a distance. Yeah, those teeth are a lot more prominent now. I think that I like that. A friend mentioned TED style presentation where an art director said that he gets annoyed by seeing that sort of thing. Not sure who it was that said it. I'd be interested to know, because he might be just talking about a context where he's maybe entrenched in this company or this IP for many years, and that may garner a lot of attention from artists, and they all just submit random stuff to him rather than he needs very specific things, right? So yeah, I wouldn't say that he's wrong. It's just, it sounds like the context is maybe missing from the situation. South Park games, I found those games a unique way of applying a sense of humor. South Park does in general, yeah. I haven't played them. It's sort of more of a turn-based JRPG style. It's not my brand. It looks fun though, and the writing apparently is hilarious. Hello, nice to be here. Can't wait to see how this goes. Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, Blake, if you can find that, I'd love to watch that actually and see what the person's talking about, because it's just if we were just talking about in a very general sense, I'm sure there's many art directors that would be annoyed by certain kinds of art if that's all they get, right? I mean, for me personally, I know that anime and manga is really popular. If I were to see a whole bunch of that in a portfolio, I would be annoyed. And only because, like, it would be nice to see that, oh, you like to do that as well, great, right? But if your portfolio is just full of like one note of something, then it's going to be like, well, is this all you've practiced? You know, if I put you in a situation of drawing fantasy or sci-fi, right, are you going to struggle with that, you know, realistic sci-fi and fantasy or horror or whatever it is, because you've only ever practiced and got good at a method whereby you create believable female anime characters, right? So that could maybe be an indication of a problem there. Yeah, if you could track it down, that would be awesome. Because I really do think that there's some context missing in that. But I mean, also, like, an art director can look for whatever the heck they want, right? No one, if they feel like they need some rules to get the right people in, then that's their prerogative, right? But it's always just something I kind of am guarded about when there's these sort of truths about what you should and shouldn't have, because there's a lot of different, like I said, contexts where some things make sense, some things don't, right? So I'm getting sort of these little bumps on here, making them feel a little bit kind of bubbly and gross, maybe sort of like warts or pimples on, because like right now the material is kind of quite fluid on his body, so we can get some of those things. It's really handy to do that on the profile of a design, because it shows us some depth, right? When we're looking straight into it, say like his teeth, we don't get to see how far those things are sticking off very easily. We can do that with shadow and light, and make it believable enough, but the profile or the silhouette edge is going to be a really good way of seeing that as well. They're really good. Yeah, I believe you. They've got really good reviews. I agree, even though I enjoy anime. I remember reading an article of an animator that broke into the anime industry. He said that people hiring him wanted to see more variety in his art style, not just big googly eyes. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. When you look at anime and manga, the artists are really well versed, well, the good ones anyway, are really well versed in anatomy, right? And some of the background paintings are fantastic. The character design, creature design is super inspiring. Where I kind of disconnect, it's just not my aesthetic, right? Which is fine. Will I watch it and read it? Yeah, sure, right? But it's not just what I gravitate towards, maybe, right? I kind of have a little bit of an attention deficit for style. I like to see things that are different quite a bit. Say like Jamie Hewlett's Gorillas versus, you know, something like Pixar style. I mean, Pixar style is a really good one, because when you look at those films, I think I've talked about this before on the stream, maybe it was my life drawing stream on Mondays, but when you look at some of the recent or the past few years of Pixar films, the style has slowly been honed into being very similar, right? And so Big Hero 6 characters could fit into something like what's the one with the characters in the girl's memory? What is that called? Anyway, I mean, you can go from animation to animation, kind of plug those characters in. They seem to fit in that world, right? Inside Out. Thank you. And that's fine. I mean, that definitely sells. This is what Disney knows is proportion of face and sort of their specific stylization is definitely appealing to people, right? And so they sell that, and they sell a lot of that. I mean, look at you could take some of the adult characters from Frozen and put them into Inside Out as adult characters there, and for the most part they would gel, right? There may be little fluctuations of style. I'd say Up, you see a little bit more playfulness with some of the shape language of the designs, where Russell's really round and the old guy, whatever his name is very square, right? And the bad guys is very thin kind of pull. You get a little bit of that. In Inside Out, they have more fun with the characters in the brain, right? The psyche characters, right? The angry dude is all square and squat, and the depressive one is kind of round and rotund and so on, right? So they do have fun with it, but then you go and look at something like Missing Link, right? A lot of Leica studio stuff really expands upon some of that look development stuff. It's the shape language, the style, right? Yeah, I mean, you can go through and look at different kind of animations and start to pick that out. Anime, for instance, would really, there are fluctuations within the style for sure, but in general, you're going to get very similar, say, structures of face for male, female character, kids, even bad guys, right? There starts to become this thread of similarities between types of bad guys, right? So that's fine. It works. It's sort of like a medium to sell stories at that point, and other designs. So, but it's just something that I, for instance, I don't gravitate towards. But to each their own. It's a very, very popular medium, and it seems to have blown up in my lifetime, right? I remember seeing anime and stuff when I was a kid, and even when in the early 2000s, I feel like it wasn't even half as popular as it is now. I think with kind of streaming and internet being what it is, it's a lot easier to get that stuff now, right? You don't have to go through some weird anime importer like Comic Book Shop or something to see those things. Anyway. Inside, yeah, very good game. Yeah, Missing Link, just some of the production design on that was just insane, inspiring to me. Coraline I haven't seen, but I definitely want to see that. The edgy stuff, yeah. The first anime that I watched, and I'm not an aficionado at all, but Ninja Scroll was one of my favorites, and that's super violent and harsh. So I'm sure there's even more hardcore stuff like that, but I quite enjoyed it, right? Like, it's just something that's not a kid's cartoon necessarily. So that's why I think a lot of people do gravitate towards anime, is because it's not just kind of after school special cartoon like stuff, which is, I think, given Western animation a resurgence because they know they can sell that stuff, right? Because anime is doing well. So you get things like Adult Swim and now Netflix, their animation department is popping off. Like, I love Rick and Morty. I feel like in the last season, I've only just started watching the most recent season. There's tons of foul language in it, which I don't mind, but I was like, did something change for them? I don't know. I guess they've been given free reign on being crass, which fits, I think. I don't know, what do you guys think? I don't know if you guys watch Rick and Morty. You're gonna get some of these teeth not being super tight together, right? His bite is gonna be a little bit disturbed and bent. things look like there's some gaps in his teeth. Maybe we'll give him some human teeth in there as well. I think that's always creepy when you see that. Kubo, Wes Anderson's, is it Isle of Dogs? That was fun. That was super weird, but like super traditional. Fantastic Mr. Fox. I didn't love that movie, but I like stop motion for sure. I felt we were about to get a more mature movie than this blob of a character comes out of nowhere. I haven't seen that. Soul 2020. Huh. Mr. Pickles, yeah. I have Rick and Morty pajamas. That's nice. I don't know how people wear pajamas, if you guys do that. I'm just... My internal temperature is so hot that I just am way too hot to be wearing clothes to bed. Like a suit, it almost looks like, but some people, super comfortable. I don't know. So getting these kind of gross lips in here, trying to maybe even play off of some of the stuff we're doing over on this side. I'm going to speed it up a little bit here because I feel like I'm getting a little bit waylaid by having fun rendering. I do want to kind of get some mileage out of this. And that's very much a concept art thing where you have to be careful that you don't just kind of just hang out with the piece and enjoy yourself. It sounds like that's something you should do, but also, like, as a commercial artist, I mean, you got to get work done, right? So you may have to go a little bit faster and be a little bit more coarse with it. So just be wary of that kind of thing. These things over here were supposed to be like gills. So I might have them still be gills, but I want to make them maybe black. And then we can put some speck highlight on them to make them feel wet. But I do want to use a little bit of that light in the background to capture a bit of their silhouette. Chicken Run, yeah, that was a great film. Awesome. Hey, welcome. Is Canada warm? That must be a joke question. It can be, and that's why we're all huddled up against the border in the States, to the States, is it can also be very cold. Most of the time it's more on the chilly side, so we're very northern peoples, like Nordic people would be in, say, Europe, or Russians, that kind of thing. That's why hockey's a thing, because we always, despite even global warming, we always have ice at some point in the year. Let's kind of get some of the sagging flesh in here so it looks like it's kind of pinching down. So that's that shadow back there. We want to serve that. Make sure those guys are all in darkness. I mean, that eyeball back there could be a little bit darker. Let's get that guy going on. Get a little bit more rim coming in on this side as well. Kind of trying to get this sort of the lip pulling outward from this guy. Maybe kind of span this out this way a little bit so we can continue that vibe over here. Yeah, it's not feeling too bad. I'm just gonna kind of edge in some highlights here, maybe some like, almost like some tear. Let's use a brighter highlight than that. Some fluid at the base of the eyelid, sort of like tear ducts produce for our eyelids. I am going to pop that speck there, be a bit brighter. Those guys, and let's go back to just kind of creating a bit more volume with our highlights. I can't talk today. In there. Feeling not too bad. Get some rim light crawling over this stuff over here. So that feels pretty good for that area. I mean, I could spend a lot more time on this stuff, but I just want to kind of get that idea for him. So let's take another look. What he was, what he is now, right? So to not create a bad habit here, I don't want to kind of start in on some of these guys that have had a little bit more work. I would want to work on some of these guys out here just to form them up. And I think maybe the other end, yeah, just a little bit over there. Oh, I know the, it's about like a soul singer that shapeshifts or something happens to him. It didn't look too bad to me. It actually looked like they were playing a little bit more with some style. So, but it is always, I mean, that's the market they're after. Something, I think, Frozen's made something insane, like after merchandise and everything, $6 billion for Disney. And that's not even Frozen 2, right, included in that. So they know what they're doing. At least they make money. So, yeah. Snow and Christmas, not where I'm at, but in the rest of Canada, yeah. It's finally, I have a face connected to the pre-recorded lectures I had. Ah, yes, this is me. Yeah, I mean, you can go and look at sort of the breakdown of of what happened, or of what they made. The movie, I think, only made something like 1 point something billion. It made $1 billion pretty fast though. But the merchandising is just like, they know what to do with that, right? And they've just gone off on that. And so I think Cars is up there as well as being like, it didn't do amazing, I think, in the theater, or at least that they didn't get a ton of money from it, from the theatrical release. But the merchandising on that film has been crazy high. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a Frozen ride in the works at Disney World, or maybe there already is. I don't know. I don't stay up on that stuff. All right, let's try and get some of this stuff in here worked out. Yeah. If only, hey, just have 1% of that $6 billion. Of 6 billion. Somebody can calculate that for me. All right, let's get some of that light crawling up on this guy in here. What I want to kind of pick up is just some of the bumps and raised portions of the flesh of this guy, just barely gripping light as it falls off around the side, right? You can even use a bit of a gradient there. Airbrush is good for that. Again, we make it a darker core. All the way through. And then we can kind of just trail along the edge and pull out some of these shapes. Hook up a little bit of render on the surrounding elements, right? Excuse me. So there is some light coming from up above, we know that. So you can start to bring a little bit of that in as almost fill light. I would want it to be less than what we're seeing on the arm up in here, just because it's kind of in shadow and it's a little bit further away. But it might be nice to kind of plug in very lightly to some of these other areas back here, just to give it some volume. And I am going to give it some rim light, not nearly as strong of rim light as what we're seeing in the rest of the tentacle. Human eye is pretty good at picking those things up, so do something like that. And then not afraid to just end up in silhouette on this guy that's further away, right? As long as I've got enough contrast there, it can be enough. And again, we can always come back and tweak those things. So that guy's looking not too bad. At least he's got a pass on him. Let's get up into here and kind of start to work with some of these volumes. Instead of kind of creating these like really round contours all the way up, which I'm starting to kind of detect is happening, I may want to kind of cut across some of these a little bit so that it doesn't feel so uniform, like some tubing or something like that. So just to kind of disrupt some of that, I'll go through and try and change it up. Frozen merchandise, yeah, no, I was surprised. Like I watched it and you know, it was whatever, pleasant movie, but I didn't realize it hit so well for kids, and like little girls love it, and I think little boys as well, right? It's like it's super fun. I ever watched South Park? I did a little. I do and have. I just not religiously. Can't let it go. Nice. They're bringing back the Animaniacs cartoon, but I'm nervous about the political correctness. Of course, it will be affected. I think you mentioned that before, Animaniacs. Yeah, it'll be different time, right? Like it or not, it's not the same era. But hopefully, it retains some of its charm. I enjoyed it, but I think people, and there are lots of other people that enjoyed Animaniacs way more than me. Some of these things are a bit bulbous all over. So I'm just trying not to like make things too uniform. Even if there's a chaotic pattern, it can still end up being a pattern where there's all these little bubbly kind of things all the way up, right? It's going to be nice sometimes to switch gears and have those things be a little bit more or less uniform in a way, right? So try and find ways to make it feel a lot different. Some shadows in through here. Strut right over top of that. So some of this line work we mentioned last week, you can just replace it with rimlight or whatever makes sense. for membrane popping over top. Or maybe we'll go the other way and make those things dark. And then the membrane stretching over the top will be a little bit lighter. Some nice sharp highlight off of that. Not feeling too bad. I feel like I'm pretty happy with things right now, and I kind of want to get into blending a bit, so I might actually collapse that. Actually, edit, undo, let's save it. And in case this all goes south, at least I'll have a save point to come back to. Hello, welcome. I was born in the 90s, why are people so sensitive? That's a very big question. Lots of things, I'm sure. Are they? Thursday, yeah, welcome. The word is on my network that they are in fact bringing the Animaniacs back and didn't hold back. I didn't hold back my concerns about it. All right, so we've saved it. We'll drop that down now, and we'll kind of continue on with some of these things. Brush size is way too big there. I've been playing a little bit more with Clip Studio, and there are plenty of things in that package that so far I find they do a better job than Photoshop with, blending being one of them. I just find their blending is a little bit more robust. Some interesting vector drawing tools as well. I think I might play with it a little bit more as an alternative to Photoshop on desktop, because it after using Procreate enough, you really start to realize how limited Photoshop is. I mean, granted, it was never meant to be a illustration package. I think this is sort of like a second thought for Adobe, for sure. It certainly seems so with their recent updates. It does, like, just don't feel like those guys have tested much. Lots of people having problems with the newest updates. But that's not new. I mean, anytime I've updated Photoshop, something's broken. It's almost like it's just what you'd expect from app development. working on prop design for my portfolio. I was curious to know what sorts of things would an art director be looking for in terms of general presentation and design when they are reviewing portfolios for prop designs. That's a big question. It depends on, again, the art director. It's not like you take an art director course and you're all the same. Typically what happens with art directors is they're promoted internally from some other role, because you're not going to start in the job as an art director. You're going to start as like a lighter, a modeler, a concept artist, something along those lines, surfacer even. So certain people will be out for aesthetics first, certain people will be out to make sure that the mechanics or the functionality of your prop makes sense, down to whether it you know, your designs seem like they can actually be made, that you're not relying on too much on kind of cheating things. So yeah, certain things like that. It's always hard to say depending on, because I've had even art directors that are quite different person to person, right, from job to job. So in terms of I know that's not super helpful, but unfortunately that's sort of the vibe. I would always just intend with prop design to make it look like it could work, right? The functionality is being thought of. It's really easy to make pretty shapes and call it a day, right? It's hard to make something look like it actually works, because you have to put on your engineer cap, as much as us concept artists can be engineers, and try and make it look like, oh, well, that stands to reason that could work in there, right? Because this pivot arm looks like it has enough room to swing around the back of that truck, or whatever it is, right? If I were to look at a portfolio and be disappointed at what I'm seeing, it would probably just end up being like this person's only looking at aesthetics in all of their pieces. It's okay to have pieces where it's just kind of like a cool battering ram or something like that, but I want to see that they're thinking, right? That there's design involved, not just like functionality design involved, not just aesthetics. Because aesthetics are good, and a lot of times they can get you pretty far, but sometimes they just don't. It's not the be all end all. I'm gonna add some really intense spec on this to be a representation of a wet surface, which is creating uniformity, which is creating that specular highlight, right? So it's like water. When you splash water on your skin, you'll get more speck highlight than if you have dry skin, right? So that's what I'm doing in here. I mean, we could have that even like target areas where it looks like water is sort of dripping off. Or if there's pores in the skin, that kind of thing. How do we know what any of this looks like? Reference. Practicing looking at reference. All right, so. Let's grab a really brilliant white. We're starting to kind of compete a little bit with some of the values in the background in these lighter sections, so I can opt to hit some of the spec with something a bit brighter. We could probably afford to do that to this guy over here as well. get the water almost leaking off of the body as it kind of splashes out. I mean, we could even put little droplets kind of coming out of the water. If I were to do that, I would, the reason I'd start with some darker values is it's going to be reflecting some of that little droplet's going to reflect some of the shadow from around the room. And then I can come in with my highlights and kind of treat those with the speck highlight and whatnot. Some of those droplets aren't going to necessarily be super round, so you can kind of just play with that as well. I continue to develop that. I just want to maybe establish a little bit of a start to it, and then I can come back into that later. All right, so we've dealt with that guy a little bit. Let's go and pay some attention to these other tendrils. How was the vacation? It was good. It was really relaxing. Thanks for asking. Did I game on vacation? No, I did not. It's good to take a break from screens, since that's primarily what I do for a living, is look at screens. The older I get as well, the less time I have for games, and also a little bit of the less desire to play them, to be honest. I've played so many games in my life from when I was a kid. It's just not something I gravitate towards as much. Specifically because when you get older, you want to achieve things, you know, and video games can be great references, but ultimately being good at a video game, unless you're going to be a professional streamer, which is it's usually unlikely, right? Not impossible, of course, but definitely not going to be my career choice. It just doesn't, video games don't really amount to much, right? It's entertainment. It's like playing cards. I mean, you can love playing bridge or whatever the heck you like as a card game, but does that amount to anything other than sort of relaxation and entertainment? Not really. Wouldn't say. So, food for thought. But, you know, I'm sure some people would disagree with me. That is the way I roll. I'm also maybe a bit older than some of you guys, so you can check in with me when you're older. Things change. We got a little bit of that light still coming from the top, so I want to pay service to that. I don't want to make these eyes feel like they're glowing, right? I just wanted to establish the local value first, and then I could kind of add the lighting. Little bit of that weak light source may hit the bottom of these guys, just enough so that I'm not seeing just pure dark shadow. And that can be just a nice way of bringing that out. That's not feeling too bad. How do you pass the time if you don't game or watch TV? Passing time is there's a good talk from oh man, I can't remember his name, from Black Flag, talking about kind of like passing time. You know, we have a finite amount of time, and so I want to use that to make things, right? If possible. Sometimes that, I mean, it doesn't mean that I won't play video games or watch TV, but you know, the older I get, I almost feel like guilty about it because I know that I want to be making things. And so more and more over the years, it's been something that, you know, I target. I mean, I also am very busy with being the head of the department of the school, and a lot of those responsibilities take a lot of my time. So yeah. I also like to not be sitting in front of a computer if I'm going to pass time. You know, I'd like to go visit friends as much as you can in COVID times, but yeah. Let's get some shadow on the glass here, just some ambient occlusion where not a lot of that light's passing through. I feel good there. So I really quickly stubbed in a lot of this value over here, so it is time to go in and kind of just make sure that that's cleaned up. Some of these guys popped out from the background. I really need to kind of chill some of these guys out a bit. Chill in comparison. Yeah, I believe that. That's the coffee you drink. I'm still in my 20s, but every time I play games I feel guilty, so I guess that feeling never goes away, even though we need to relax. Yeah, I think it's a healthy thing. Keeps you in check. I mean, I can't remember what the name of this documentary was, but it was about World of Warcraft back when it was sort of more in its heyday. Just seeing what some people let their lives get to just to be able to play that game, like lose their jobs, live in squalor, all this kind of thing. So I mean, I kind of think of that like, whoa, it can get really bad. It's never been that bad for me, but I mean, even as a kid, I knew that video games were a huge distraction to like getting schoolwork done and that kind of thing. And they're nowhere near what they look like nowadays, right? In terms of even just hours that you could put into it, or the fidelity that you get out of them today. So yeah, I think it's still healthy that you can feel that sense and maybe shift some of your priorities a bit. Because again, like say if you wanted to be a concept artist and you spend, say you work a full-time job and you get home and you're working as maybe like a clerk in a store somewhere, whatever it is, right? And you don't want to be that, and you want to start studying with CG Spectrum, and you want to get a job, but you get home and you've got maybe 5 hours or 6 hours before you go to sleep, and you spend 4 hours of that playing video games. You got to eat in there, and you got to get ready for bed or do any sort of chore stuff, and there's not much room left for practicing as a concept artist, right? And it's just going to be way harder for you to achieve your goals if, you spend all your time escaping and relaxing, right? So it's always something that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially now. There's just so much entertainment being kind of dumped in everyone's lap, competing streaming services, video games being launched and released at an insane pace compared to what it used to be. Anything worth quality anyway. Tons of indie games, and so I'd say more than ever the distractions are at an all-time high. So would that mean that we have to be even more vigilant to avoid falling into the trap of just always escaping instead of building skill? Kind of like this open, lighter, fleshy part, I don't mind it. I just I would have to kind of just be aware of whether or not that's really playing to what I'm setting up in the rest of the renders in here. It could be just something too different where I've only got it happening in one area where somebody might be confused or just spend too long trying to resolve what is this now, right? So I might add just a hint more. I could use the selection tool to maybe give that edge a little bit more harshness, rigidity. It's always about balance, absolutely. I think there's a good section of every population where that becomes more difficult, though, because it is easier to kind of just tune out. Because, like, say, practicing concept art or any discipline, it takes, frustration, it takes energy. Sometimes you just don't have that. Whereas if I'm watching a TV show, I can just sit down and let it go. No effort on my part, other than just keeping my eyes open. Or if it's a super boring show, not falling asleep. So that's not feeling too bad. I want to just go through here and get some of these edges because they're falling off a bit. That light's going to be really weak by the time we get over here, but you're always able to cheat a little bit of the lighting. This stroke in through here was just flagrant, so I'm just gonna go fix that up. Be a little bit more targeted about where these things go. A little bit of that spec highlight goes a long way to give us a sense of that wetness, right? Uniformity that we're talking about. A little bit better in there. Keeping it gross, right? I mean, we would definitely want to come back onto this guy and give him some spec for doing it everywhere else. When I'm doing this, I'm thinking about peaks and valleys. Think of a mountain with a valley in between another mountain. The mountain tips are receiving spec reflection. The valley itself is receiving spec reflection. It always depends on where your light source is located, but that can kind of be the way spec reflection sort of settles on forms. So he can be kind of wet, right? We'll establish that for now. I kind of want to get a pass done on this stuff over here still. Got some weird stares from people. Some of this lighting. I want some of the teeth to kind of move off the face a little bit so they don't feel perfect. Dark fleshy element in there. Cutting some of these teeth off so they look a little bit more like, less like incisors and more like the rest of our kind of grinding teeth. Get some of the water dripping off here. We'll grab a brighter highlight. that light wrapping around the side. Setting up our little beads of water. Not too bad. Some of that water may be cutting across some of the teeth, so it doesn't look like it's just kind of unaffected by that water, right? I'd probably go and look at some reference of swimmers kind of emerging out of water to see what it would look like when we get that translation of the water from the surface up onto, say, something like a head that's coming out or an arm that's coming out. For now, I can kind of stuff this in. Not feeling too bad in here. Some of these things maybe just need a little bit of quick finesse. Again, if I was taking a ton of time for maybe a marketing piece, like we're only doing 2-hour chunks each Thursday, right? If I were doing this, like, this would be like not even 1 day so far. Well, it'll be about 1 day's worth of work. This fourth session on this guy. So. Not too bad, right? From design into, well, we played the carrion game a little bit beforehand, but getting to this point with this guy, right? So. Pretty good into there, okay. Piping doesn't feel too bad. We lifted this up a little bit too much. My mistake. There we go. So at that point, I mean, we might start to add some color for the last little bit, just to tuck into that a little bit. So I'm gonna start a gradient map, and I want to get rid of the gray as an underpainting first, so I'm just going to go into my gradient map, and first I'll pick something that's a little bit more representative of my values. So when I'm picking an underpainting color, you know, a lot of the times in traditional art, you'll see the underpainting be something of like a warm tone of some sort, so that when you paint on top of it, even if you're painting with cool tones, you'll get some of that coming through, right? And it won't feel desaturated. Now, you could go with a cool if you wanted, but for me, I think I might at least start with warm. We can kind of play with how that looks at least at this point. Get rid of a little bit of my lighter values. I might want sort of like this really warm, fleshy, bloody kind of thing coming from the skin of the creature. Doesn't really suit the rest of the machine, but I think that might be a really nice contrast anyway to some of the cool metallic parts that we might see, and even the fluid, right? So let's at least start with that. I mean, as a gradient map, I mean, this is only mapping what we've laid down, right? So I haven't ruined anything. It's a nice non-destructive way of adding color. And so, you know, I might start with something like that. The mask is always there if you want to cut back to the grayscale. I don't know why I'd want to do that. I'd rather just add, say, something like a saturation layer on top, or change that to be some sort of screen or overlay or something else that would tweak the color, right? So like I could come in here with a cool sort of gray blue overlay and see sort of what the effect is with that. Maybe it would start to kind of bring back a hint of that gray. I mean, if we go through these different modes, you can start to see sort of what that might do. Color might be a nice way to add that coolness back in, and of course I can add a mask to that. So I might go through and just add that to the structure in here real quick. Not the glass itself, but just the metallic structure over top. Gotta keep an eye out for where those other struts are. And again, I can just come back in and clean up any sort of painting outside the lines that I've done. It could be as easy as locking this in as a selection. I could have set that up as a selection before, but that's fine. Like, we can work pretty fast this way. Some Orwellian stuff, yeah. No. Yeah, some weirdness there, for sure. I'm just gonna hit these angles pretty quick because they're fairly simple to achieve with the linear marquee tool. I could opt to add some color in through the back, like the top of the tank where we're able to see through to the backside. Depending on what I'm after there, you know, it might be good to have another color layer down here. We could colorize the fluid, so if I've got like cool blues, I may want that to be something like greenish. We could play with that for the fluid. The water down below could be maybe something a little bit cooler, so that they don't look like the same kind of water. So let's deal with something like a mid-tone green in there. And I mean, even with the creature's body, I think I can even just go into my mask and actually just kill it all, and then paint back in through the mask just my creature. We're setting up the colors though. I mean, if you're doing this at home, don't get upset right away if it's not like the most amazing transformation you've ever seen. It's in your own work, right? It's just like you gotta take steps to get to the final look, and this is not anywhere close to the final color, but we're setting it up. And then also with this masking, I can choose to select the mask as a selection, and I can bring in other color tweaks on top of it. Just a fairly quick way of adding color. Back to my green, I'm gonna make it a little bit more green yellow at the base. Maybe a bit more bluish green at the top. I can even go in here with my hue slider and see if I can find something that feels a little bit better. I get a tiny bit more blue. Backdrop being gray is not a bad thing. I just don't think that the glass should be gray. We'll maybe try something where we do a very similar thing with color. Try something in the yellows. Too green. So a lot of this color is actually going to affect our little creature dude, but I want to make the fluid inside almost feel like it's turned. It's almost like a murky pool because of like almost like this creature has affected it. And we might get some yellow sort of safety color on the outside edge, the rim. Tank rim. Make sure we're not using an eraser. I might go with a multiply on that just because I don't want it to be too overbearing. I like the look of that, at least right now. Plug it in like this and then maybe we'll roll through some options. Vivid light's kind of nice though. We'll leave it there for a minute. Not feeling too bad, and then maybe we can get some like a remapping right now with the color gradient could work really well to stomp out anything that you don't want to be happening, right? So that could work pretty well. At this point I could add another layer. I could start to with my frame. Let's just name that frame. That's a color layer, so I could even grab some of this rusty vibe and I could start kind of getting some of that seeded throughout, right? Or I could load, select load, load selection, mask. And then start a new layer up here and have that be like, maybe we'll go with an overlay. Some of this rusty red, right? That could be blood, that could, from the creature, that could be just rust. Maybe I'll go with something a bit brighter, right? With a textured brush, that might actually feel even better still. So let's find something here. Like a crusty, rusty texture. Something like that almost feels good. I mean, this almost feels like blood, which depending on how kind of severe you're gonna get with the gore and something like this, maybe the creature's kind of cut itself. I mean, has this container been sitting in some government basement forever? Maybe, maybe not. This guy's finally broken out or what, right? Like if I deleted that and I only did that around sort of the broken parts, that actually might look pretty cool. Deselect, I can just freewheel with the damage on the glass, maybe. Doesn't look too bad. We're roughing it out. I can obviously I can go in and mask it out or erase wherever I don't want to be, but that might be fine. Might warm up the cement even in front here and let the background be that gray. That's what works. By hand. So I'm just gonna kind of grab something really barely warm. Just test it here in the light. Color's good, but I would definitely want to take something. Oh, let's just plug it in there. Let's see how it goes. Not too bad. A little bit too much. Personally, whoops, switched layers somehow. Oh, there we go. So I'm just gonna kind of fade that off in the back there, and then overall I'm just gonna grab everything and pull down the saturation by a little bit. I just want a hint so it's not just pure gray. Completely devoid of any color information. Just a subtlety. So still pretty rudimentary in our color, but we're starting to kind of set things up here for the look of it, right? The rim itself is maybe a bit aggressive, so I could always cut that down by a bit. Reason why I would want to do that is I don't want you staring at the rim of the tank. I want you to look at the guy, right? In which case for him it might be right that I would amp that up a little bit more, so I could throw in another layer where maybe I am throwing an overlay in and I do get kind of warmer and kind of draw more attention to those saturations in his face, right? Wherever I'd see that a lot of that red come through. So that base orangey color was fine to start, but it's just an underpainting, right? I don't need to be beholden to it. And so an overlay is not bad for midtones, but it doesn't do great work on lighter values. So, you know, if I wanted to say paint some bloody splashes everywhere, you know, I could go back to this layer and kind of use that. But again, that's working in some instances. I could start a new gradient map and then just make everything super deep dark red, and then the higher end something that's like kind of really bloody red in there. And then similar thing, just blot out that mask with that mask, and then I can paint back in with it by just by painting in the mask, right? So it could be like there's blood kind of leaking down. You might use like a different brush type. I probably want to do something with like smudging a lot here, so it looks like it's sort of, this guy's like smudged some of that stuff across. That could look pretty cool. So what am I going to do with the rest of the day? Work. That's what I'm doing now. Poor thing cut itself. It regenerates. It's fine. Yeah, glad you had a good time. I'm glad that people were happy to show up today. So yeah, I mean, we'll start to kind of wind it down here. I do want to see sort of like what we could kind of produce in terms of a look on this. Some of the tentacles would softly be kind of able to be seen through some of that glass, I think. Right, so I might kind of work with that a bit. Something else we could do with the glass itself is have some speck highlight coming off of that. Right, like I might do something where I get a reflection coming off of, say, this piece of glass. And what I might do with that is like a linear dodge, pick like a warm light source, so something warmish yellow. Maybe a little bit more warm. I could go find that brush again, just for something noisy, and then use the mask to mask out some sort of disturbances. Like take the linear dodge off for sure. Right, you can start to kind of get some scratchy noise out of it. That specific brush is introducing more value, so that's not super useful. There we go, that's actually what we wanted. Ignore me on that, I was just mixed up with which value I was using. So there we go, right? So I can kind of like get some, there's almost like a canvas texture coming out of this now, so maybe I'd have to go find a bit of a different brush, but I can kind of paint in some of that highlight, making it look a little bit more gritty as it comes in, which might be fun to do on that pane, on the top pane. It's where I'm going to get some of my texture coming from, right? So but I'm starting to see these like cross grains of canvas, so it's just that's not a great brush. So I'd have to go find something maybe a little bit more noisy for that look. But you can see sort of like how those layers can really come together and give you an interesting kind of vibe, right? At a certain point with this as well, just like we've been collapsing everything else, I might collapse this and just continue on with the flat paint. Very destructive, sometimes not great for working with clients. So, you know, if you're doing this kind of stuff for client work, just keep that in mind. Maybe you have to be a little bit more separate. It's going to take more time, but it's going to save you in the long run if you have to do a lot of feedback. Okay, so we're going to end there for today. But we got further today. We got a lot of our grayscale value mapping rendering done. And we're just starting to kind of begin to play with color in there. So try some of this stuff out on your own. See what you come up with. And I think we'll maybe commit one more next week to getting some more of the color done on this guy to wrap him up. And then we can put a pin in this guy and start our next piece. Okay. Thanks, gang. Have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday for some life drawing where we're going to be working on our outlaw still. And so join then. We'll see how it goes. And otherwise, yeah, have a great time. We'll see you next time, gang. Take care.